Atrocities in Syria as Druze are massacred.
We, the sons of the clans, came to support Bedouins with our own ammunition. 7 months on from the fall of the Assad regime, the interim president's authority is under pressure, with his fledgling government struggling to quell this fighting between communities after claims it's failed to protect Christians and mismanaged relations with Kurdish and Alawite minorities.
Yeah, so just to go through that, the ceasefire they discussed there ended up falling through. He discussed sending forces to quell. In reality, what ended up causing the ceasefire was when he withdrew the government forces away. For context, we've discussed the Druze people. They're a fascinating people, fascinating religion in a previous episode, maybe a few weeks ago, and definitely worth going back and listening in on that because it gives a lot of very valuable context. But the fight between, so Bedouins are nomadic people, kind of like Gypsy in Europe, and the Romani people would be the correct name for them. In the Arab world, Bedouins are herder people, so they travel with their sheep and then they find wells and they move from place to place. Recently, they've mostly been settling. They're not as transitory as they used to be, but they are Sunni Muslims, and they align with the vast majority of the jihadi forces. A lot of them joined ISIS and joined Al-Qaeda and a lot of these forces. We know that Al-Julani is from Jabhat al-Nusra, which was an off branch of Al-Qaeda. So after the Assad regime fell, Israel bombed the remnants of the Assad army. So basically all the tanks and fighter jets and anti-air systems and stuff like that just annihilated it all in 48 hours. Almost nobody was killed because most of the soldiers had ran away, cleaned things up that way. And what they told us, Ashara is the new name for Al-Julani. It's not new, but that's what he prefers to be called now, trying to change his image from what it used to be, is don't go south of Damascus. And the reason is south of Damascus is close to the border with Israel. We don't want jihadists on our border, right, on Israel's border. And then also that's these Druze minorities Druze are very peaceful people. They get along very well with the Christians. There was a Christian who was a Christian minister who was massacred with 17 family members during these attacks on the Druze as well. So it isn't just on the Druze. Previously, so here's the thing. He came to power with all of these jihadist groups, and he put many of these jihadists in top ministerial positions and position in the defense forces. So he basically gave the jihadists the keys to the kingdom. And the first thing they did is to go and to annihilate the Alawites. The Alawites were, Bashar al-Assad's clan. So that kind of made sense. And during then they were annihilating and massacring Christians as well. But when it came to the Druze, Israel basically said, if you send forces south of Damascus, we will bomb them. And that is exactly what happened here. The Bedouin kind of started it. They kidnapped a fruits and vegetables vendor, and they took all of his stuff and his truck, and they beat him up and almost killed him. And then the way it works in the Middle East is the Druze kind of retaliate because force only understands force. So they did it back to the Bedouins. The Bedouin kind of did it back, and it was tit for tat there for a little while until the Bedouins just started to call all the jihadists from all the rest of Syria. And tens of thousands of jihadists started to flow in from the rest of Syria with the protection of the Al-Julani regime. And they just started massacring the Druze. Massacring as in going into the hospitals and murdering every single person after they rape all the females. And there's footage of it all, and it is devastating. I think you have a clip. Why don't we take a look and then we can continue.
Sure. And again, just as a footnote, this clip does have some more sensitive content. So anyone that wants to at least be aware of it, we'll give you the heads up. Let's take a look. This does certainly put things in perspective as to the realities on the ground there.
Graphic footage shows 8 family members being marched through the streets of the southern Syrian city of Sueda by gunmen. These prisoners are from the Druze minority, and one of them is an American citizen. 35-year-old U.S. citizen Hassam Saraya had studied in Oklahoma before returning to Syria, where he and his family members were shot dead. The gunmen shout, "Allahu Akbar, God is great." One man is heard shouting, "We wanted to offer you safety, but you refused to leave." Relatives of the captives who were killed told CNN they fought back against the gunmen when their home was surrounded, but surrendered after one of them was wounded. The person who shot this video passed by a bullet-pocked car. A separate clip shows the captives on their knees. Someone shouts, "Dogs," before a hail of machine gun fire lasting 15 seconds. All 8 captives were killed. In response to this video, spokesmen for the Syrian government told CNN they categorically reject crimes against civilians, adding that anyone found guilty will be held accountable in accordance with the laws of the Syrian Arab Republic. The execution is just a small snapshot of the madness that has engulfed this part of southern Syria since mid-July, where various Druze militias, which seek limited autonomy from Damascus, have battled Bedouin tribesmen loosely aligned with the central government. The fighting has left hundreds dead, civilians as well as fighters, and has forced more than 90,000 people to flee their homes.
And that reporting was from CNN and routers, and we did block some of the images that were there just to make it a little more presentable on the video platforms that we're on. But yeah, that's more of a taste of what it's really like on the ground there.
Yeah, YouTube marks all of our content shocking, and we've blurred out the shocking parts of the shocking content we're talking about. If you go to Telegram or elsewhere, and you probably should, because you should probably know what's actually going on, even though the world doesn't care to tell you. We'll get into a second exactly when the world realized what's happening in Syria, or decided to respond to it. So in the Arab world, it's very important to differentiate between what leaders say and what leaders do. Right, actions versus words is always the thing you have to follow. For example, Saudi Arabia, their greatest enemy is Iran. Israel bombs Iran and gets rid of the nuke, which is the greatest threat to Saudi Arabia's sovereignty. And Saudi Arabia says, Israel, how dare you do this unprovoked attack? In reality, Mohammed bin Salman is, thank you, Bibi. Thank you, Bibi. You saved us, right? So, and we're seeing that with the new Abraham Accords, etc. Right? So the difference between action and speech is drastic. With Al-Shara or Al-Julani, he says all the right things, right? He says we're going to send in our troops to protect. In reality, his troops are jihadists, and they're going there to join the massacre, or at least to protect the perimeter of the massacre to make sure nobody gets away. It was a massacre. If you look at the videos, it was just like October 7th in southern Israel, basically burning people alive, slaughtering them. It's just so graphic. It's so sad. For example, a video, jihadists walk into somebody's apartment, maybe on the 8th or 10th floor of a building, maybe the 3rd floor, I'm not sure, and say, go out to the porch and jump. And they force them to jump. And then while they're in the air, they start shooting them as practicing targets. So these are jihadists. They are the vast majority of Al-Julani's forces. And then obviously the Bedouins are jihadists too. And some of them, they got the protection from Al-Julani. This thankfully has all stopped. And this stopped when the world paid notice. And the world did not pay notice when thousands or hundreds were being massacred and just killed in the most vicious of ways. The world doesn't give a crap when people in the Middle East die. They really don't, unless somehow Israel is involved. If there's Jews, there's news. If there's no Jews, there's no news. And then the minute Israel started bombing so Israel immediately started bombing all these tanks that they were sending there to join the massacre, and a lot of the Humvees with machine guns. And once Israel started getting rid of all of that, that's when Syria stopped sending its forces. And that's why in the initial clip, they said, Al-Julani said he would send in his forces to quell the fight. His forces are there to join the jihad. He doesn't even control his forces. Most of them are just jihadists. They're just wearing uniforms now, but they're still like Al-Qaeda taking over Afghanistan. It's still Al-Qaeda, right? Actually, they've kind of become more moderate a little bit, whereas with Al-Julani, that's not really the case. Al-Julani he wears beautiful Armani suits. He dresses very well. He looks very respectable, and he says all the right things. And he actually does have a history of working with the CIA and the Mossad and other kind of intelligence, kind of helping squash ISIS in Syria and stuff like that. So he isn't necessarily the worst of people. It's just that he has changed. He did start as a jihadist, and he still is a jihadist. He's still a very devout Muslim. And it's not that his opinions necessarily has changed. He's just a very pragmatic. And he realizes that if he wants any chance to stay in power, he has to gain the liking. He needs the funds of Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates to rebuild Syria after the civil war. And that's to do if Syria stays united. But the Druze people are not stupid, and they saw what happened to the Alawites and what's happening to the Christians. There used to be 8 million Christians in Syria, and now there are less than 200,000. And that's because they were being massacred. So the Druze are basically saying, Israel, save us. And Israel, Bibi had promised, they won't let Al-Julani massacre the Druze. And we already, a few months ago, we discussed this when they started massacring the Druze in the capital of Damascus. Now they went to the Druze's own cities and they started massacring them there. That's really the difference here. But thankfully, it all stopped when Israel bombed the Ministry of Defense and Al-Julani's palace. And then he brought his troops back. And that's when things thankfully stopped. And now there's peace. The catalyst was that, so the Druze are very loyal to whatever country they were in. So when they were in Syria, they were loyal to Bashar al-Assad, which is one of the reasons why the Bedouins hate them so much, because the Bedouins were always Sunnis and they were always against Bashar al-Assad, and these guys were kind of government forces. But in Israel, the Druze have been loyal Israeli citizens, and they all participate in the army and they're in combat, and they're phenomenal soldiers, and they've been such from even before the state of Israel was founded. They helped defend the Jews, and they're very fascinating religion. We got into this anyhow. With the situation there, the Druze in Israel basically said, we're not going to, they saw all these videos of their brethren, literally their cousins being massacred and slaughtered and raped. And they said, we're going to go in and stop it if it takes our lives. And thousands of them went to the border, and then the Israelis kind of didn't know what to do. And they kind of went through the border, and thousands of them went into Syria to help protect their Druze brethren. And that's when Israel really ramped things up and got involved. And once Israel started bombing Al-Julani's palace and the military headquarters, that's thankfully when things calmed down. So obviously, the world very, very much criticizes Israel for starting another war and invading another country, and how dare you, blah, blah, blah. And Al-Julani is willing to sign this peace agreement with Israel under the new Abraham's Accord, which would be great.
Yeah, no, it's quite fascinating. And again, it's interesting how it really isn't properly covered in the media here.
It wasn't covered until Israel got involved. And then suddenly, the moment you can criticize Israel, that's suddenly when it got headlines everywhere. Nobody cares when the Druze are being massacred, except the Druze in Israel and the Israeli population, because we feel a blood connection with the Druze.
Well, we covered it here. So
there you go.
There's at least, we can't say no one's talking about it. And I think it's an important thing. And I think that's the value of allowing media to cover the things that we all feel are important and that we want to for discussion.
We should, in a future episode, get into Turkey. Erdogan has this whole kind of Ottoman ambitions and stuff like that, and Syria is very closely involved with all of that, and we can get into that in another episode. But discussing Turkey's involvement both with the Muslim Brotherhood and with Al-Julani and his forces in Syria is definitely a discussion we should have in a future episode as well.
I agree.
Be sure to watch our other clips and shorts and the entire episode 18 of the Yojo Show podcast.